Coming up next on Stop the Threat, on a stormy night far from the city lights, a father is awakened by thunder and lightning. Dazed and half asleep, he sees a shadow pass his window. A man with a rifle heading towards his children's room. Stop the Threat starts now. Welcome to Stop the Threat. My name is James Btowle. On today's show, we're going to take you to the home of the Colts, the Pacers, and of course the Indianapolis 500. The state of Indiana is a shall-issue state, and they have a castle doctrine with a no-duty-to-retreat clause. But it only covers private property. So be sure and check the local laws before entering any state. Everything is changing. Before I introduce you to today's panel, I want to ask you this question. What is the best weapon you have in a gunfight? That's correct. It is your brain. And on today's show, it's going to be about one of the senses in your brain, and that is your eyesight. So before I show you part of that, let me just tell you one more thing. This was sent to us from a viewer who lives, by the way, in Michigan, but he did send me this, Dave, and he's up on Lake Michigan fishing as we speak. So let me introduce today's panel. Wes Doss spent 20 years in law enforcement and presently is president of Kyber Interactive Associates and a returning contributor to Stop the Threat. Chris Wolf. Chris has been with law enforcement in the state of Louisiana for 17 years. Bill Duggan. Bill has been a police officer in the state of Massachusetts for 13 years. Now, before we get into this, I really want to read an email that I received recently from a young man. He's 14 years old. And I thought that he actually made an interesting comment here. He says, "Hello, Mr. Towle. My name is Trenton. I'm 14 years old and I live in Birmingham, Alabama. I go jogging often every morning in a bad neighborhood. I often carry a Smith & Wesson M&P air gun. The local patrol officer is aware of this. My question to you is, would you recommend that a 14-year-old jogging to take with him in a bad neighborhood an air gun?" And I thought it was an interesting question. Now, you know, you've all got children. I guess he's not feeling comfortable in this neighborhood. 14 years old, he certainly can't have anything else. What would you say to him?
That's a tough question.
Yeah, it is a tough question.
It's because on one side of it, it's seems fairly harmless, you know, and somewhat productive. On the other side of it, though, I mean, to be mistaken for somebody who's got a firearm, you know, it's a tough question to answer.
Yes. Well, first of all, my first bit of advice is don't jog in that neighborhood. You know, go to a safer place. You know, don't put yourself in harm's way. I can see a lot of potential problems, and I think Chris and Wes are going to agree with me when he identified it as a Smith & Wesson M&P, so that means it's probably one of those air guns that look that look realistic, and right. I can see a problem there.
Yeah, that could go either way, couldn't it?
Yes, sir. I just, at face value, I would say this is a bad idea.
Okay.
And unfortunately, I'd have to say maybe we can find a different exercise.
Okay. Trenton, that's the best we can tell you at this point. We may come back to that later if we have any time. But I will be right back with part one. Don't go away. Thanks for coming back, folks. Listen, we were looking at an email from Trenton, and he was 14 years old, and he asked a couple of interesting questions. And one of the things that I wanted to follow up with, and I think we'd all like to make a comment on, was the possibility of using a non-lethal weapon. What do you think about that?
I would definitely suggest looking into it, but I'm not really familiar with that particular state's laws when it's concerning, you know, pepper spray. You know, he'd have to be it might have to be a particular age before you can legally possess something like that.
I got a feeling he's going to be a little safer off with that than he would be with a look-alike gun. If the situation were to come up, you know, pulling out the pepper spray is probably not going to be as, I don't know.
Well, in the event that he did have to protect himself, and he's got this, you know, basically it's a boat anchor at this point in a real situation, and also a 14-year-old running with a pistol. It brings up too many issues that can go completely wrong. So I would definitely suggest looking into a less than lethal option.
Okay, Trenton, let's think about that some more. Send me another email. Let's talk about it a little bit. I got to show you part one of this though. Let's watch part one.
Stop right there. I have a shotgun aimed right at your face.
Okay, let me give you a little background on this. Now, it's the middle of the night. We saw him put on glasses, so he probably was not actually getting a good look at what was taking place outside the window. This is about eyesight. To him, it appeared as though there was someone with a rifle walking towards or in the direction of the bedrooms of his children. So he awakens to the lightning or whatever reason, and he's now armed himself and he's going to head off that threat. Want to start with that?
The only thing that I would critique is he gave up the advantage of being in area that he owned by stepping outside of the house, you know, and that is going to affect his vision. I'm sure, as everybody knows, that if you're in a dark room and it's dark outside, you can pretty much see outside at will. You know, as soon as he walks outside onto the porch, there's going to be a porch light or lights outside that might also have effect on his vision as well. So I like the idea of him staying inside the house to keep that advantage.
As I understand it from the follow-up, he was concerned that they were heading towards the children's area. It was his idea to go outside to try to head him off. I like the idea of staying inside better. What do you think, Wes?
I like the idea of staying better inside, but looking at what's represented in the reenactment, I mean, if you're concerned and you're security conscious, I mean, here's his backyard and this guy's walking through it, and it's no additional illumination, there's no floodlight. I mean, it's kind of hard to make those determinations. I mean, from the LE side, you know, we've had everything from tourists to illegal aliens that were lost to people suffering from Alzheimer's that have walked through people's backyards or even into homes at times. And
good point.
I mean, the light, I mean, as we have to identify things before we can take some kind of, you know, affirmative action with it.
Okay, Bill?
Problem number one is no 911 was called. First thing, you know, you advocate all the time is get help on the way. So he just went right out there. No matter what happens, there's no help on the way. And agree or disagree with Chris, I don't know. I'm a big fan of staying put, but as you brought up, that he's going to head him off because I don't know what the layout of the house was, but that is one circumstance where I would violate my rule of, you know, you want to stay put and wait for the help to arrive. Is obviously loved ones, your kids, you got to go head off that threat.
Okay, so go to the bedroom and wait in the bedroom. Huh?
With the kids.
With the kids, right. Rather than to go outside on a chance that you might be able to head him off. Now, I mean, if we're looking at this from a point of view of being smart, it would seem to me the smarter move would have been to go to the child's room and wait and see if anything were to take place. Huh?
Try a verbal communication with this person.
Okay,
Say,
I like
I
that.
see you here. You know, you're not supposed to be here. I'm in here. I've armed myself. I'm calling the police. They're on the way. Get out of here now. That might be what it takes right there.
Yeah, you know, verbal intimidation happened to be a book that a friend of mine from the FBI is writing at this moment, and I like that. I like the idea of calling 911, and he did not. When we come back, we have more to tell you. Don't go away. Welcome back to Stop the Threat. This week we are showing you a reenactment in which we entitled Perceived Threat. At this point we know that a father has awoken in the middle of the night, seen what he thought was someone walking towards his child's bedroom with a rifle, and he's responding to that. I think we've concluded that maybe the smart thing to do here would have been to go to the child's room and wait, but he chose not to do that. He chose to go outside and try to head off the threat. Anything else in this? Are we missing anything?
I mentioned not calling 911. Really?
Yeah, not calling
huge.
911. Why didn't he do that? That would have been the first smart thing to do, and maybe have the phone with him when he goes, right?
Sure.
All right, let's watch part 2.
Stop right there. I have a shotgun aimed right at your face.
I'm sorry, sir. I wasn't doing anything.
Damn it, Mike. What are you doing out this late on a school night?
I was just messing around. I didn't mean anything by it.
I could have shot you. I should call the sheriff. Get out of here. I'm not going to waste his time on this. I am going to call your father in the morning, though. Go on. Get yourself home before I change my mind.
Okay, a couple of things before we start. The reenactment was done because that was what he saw. He saw a rifle, even though it was a branch from a tree, and he was going over to the daughter's window, the little follow-up, to scare her and tap on the window and do those kinds of things. So it was supposed to be a joke. But Dad didn't see the branch. Dad saw a gun, or a rifle in this case. So that's probably the reason why you see some of the rifle in there and some of the branch in there, to try to explain that to you. Did he do the right thing? Should he have called the sheriff anyway?
I don't know about. That's a personal choice. I mean, it seemed like he knew the kid. And,
Yeah, right.
You know, he was calling it a day by letting him go. But I liked how they did that. How he wasn't sure what he saw in his hands. They talked about his glasses and him having blurred vision. Also, everybody knows when you wake up out of a deep sleep how groggy you can be and how things are really, really weird to you, or they don't seem right, or you're not sure what you're seeing.
Right. I would say the young man was very lucky. I think in a lot of circumstances, he might have been shot.
Absolutely, but you know, even that, I mean, it's not even entirely just physical vision, but I mean that sheer element of suggestion. That if you think that you saw something, or you wake up scared, you wake up, you know, you see that shadow, and you envision it to be one thing, you know, your brain's going to see something because you preloaded that information to yourself. You know, he could have gone that entire scenario having believed that kid had a rifle or something in his hands. Right. Again, this goes back to that not only notifying the authorities and getting all the proactive things in motion, but you can't fight what you can't see, and just because you simply roll out there armed, I mean, you turn the lights on, get a flashlight, do something, take some sort of actions on your part that put you in a position of advantage so you don't have to.
Yeah, actually, I think on that is once you've identified that there might be a rifle involved, you may never really look back down at the rifle. You may never lose eye contact with the threat and react to that. So, I think that was a good answer for that.
In the scenario given, I say he crossed a line that I certainly would have not put in the same situation, would not have just told him to get lost and go away, because he's in the middle of a storm, middle of the night, he's in my backyard, and he's walking toward the children's room with a great big stick, regardless if it's a rifle, stick, whatever. It could be anything. He's crossed some lines that need to be identified and documented for sure.
Yeah, and we're kind of going on what he said, okay? We don't actually know if that was truly what the young man was up to. That is what he said under duress. I don't know where to go with that other than are you going to believe him or not? Who knows what the real reason was? Maybe, it could have been that he was drawing the young lady out for other purposes. I mean, the whole thing could have been a lot different.
At the point where the homeowner identifies this guy and he drops the stick to the ground, and I think we all saw it too, the kid was thinking,
yeah,
I can take him. He was thinking right then and there, this is where I'm going to charge in and run in and get him, because the homeowner then, he said, oh, okay, he's no longer a threat to me, it's just a stick. In the middle of the night, in a rainstorm in the backyard, I don't need to do this. He did let his guard down at that point, which that was kind of
there was a moment there when things could have changed rather quickly. So it did make for an interesting perceived threat, and that's why we entitled it that. And I want to thank Dave for sending that in, actually, because I think it leads back to the point of what exactly to do when you think you know exactly what's going on and you, in fact, don't know what's going on until there's a little clearer vision in there. So we still would have been better off going to the child's room and waiting. That could have been, tap on the window is a whole lot different than facing somebody with a, right?
Well, one of the tips that I've told people, and Wes touched on it, is you have a flashlight nearby, so you have to get your flashlight.
Yeah, I like that.
Keep your gun unloaded. People think, well, I want it loaded and ready to go, but the small act of loading whatever firearm you have in your room helps you to come out of that groggy sleep because you're doing that quick load and calling 911, dialing a phone number. All those things
911 was a good idea.
Bring you out of that sleep.
They should have done that. I like that. When we come back, I've got a little bit more for you. Don't go away. Welcome back to Stop the Threat. We've just seen perceived threat, and I think we've all learned something here about what is perceived and what is real. So I want to go on beyond that a little bit, and I want to ask, since we have a full guest panel of law enforcement, I have a question that comes up from time to time in emails, and the question goes something like this. Has law enforcement reached the limit of their crime-fighting ability to protect citizens? Now, that's a loaded question, I admit. But really what they're referring to is, does law enforcement need more equipment? I mean, are you guys looking for eye in the sky? Would that be helpful? Are we keeping up with the crime?
Well, I know more equipment. All the agencies I know, including my own, are going to less lethal type equipment. That seems to be the trend because we're trying to really preserve life, keep people safe, and the camera equipment, sure. What
do you think about putting the eye in the sky?
I think that the addition of some form of surveillance is always positive, used effectively and appropriately. But there's a tendency, especially today, unlike any other time we've ever had in history of law enforcement, whether it's budget cuts or whatever it is, to dream up and come up with some sort of supplemental device to take it away from what we ought to be training people to do without that device. and you've got all these toys essentially, and then you've lost interpersonal skills. You've got people that can't communicate with the public effectively, and we run into misperceptions and misunderstandings, and then problems. And I think that's a huge one. Is officers need to be able to deal with people better as an individual.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. Chris, let me ask you this: how do you feel about 2 officers to a unit?
I think it's if it's available, and backing up what Wes said, a better trained officer is just better performance for your department. For a 2-man unit, if it's available to that department, it's a great idea.
Well, I guess when you start looking at whether or not you want to put the eye in the sky or add another person to a car, what's more effective?
Always 2 is better than 1. It's always great to have a partner there. And remote, I know Wes was left as a sheriff. His backup was quite a ways away.
Okay, just for those who may not know, why did they go away from putting 2 officers in a unit? Strictly budgetary?
In most jurisdictions, yeah, it's a manpower and coverage related issue. As budgets dwindle and there's less officers, it's more cost effective to have single man units, single vehicles out, and you can spread your manpower out. One guy can shag a call where it takes 2 guys to shag a call otherwise.
Okay. I recently read about, and I think it's up in Canada, where they have some equipment they can put on a unit that when it's driving around, it'll actually automatically start running license plates without the officer behind the wheel actually doing anything. Sure. And if it comes up with a warrant, boom, it comes up on his computer. Sure. Now, that's a piece of equipment that's probably pretty expensive, but nonetheless, in the very few seconds I have left, what do you think of that?
We have a number of agencies in the states that have implemented LPRs.
Okay, what's it called?
LPR, license plate reader.
Okay.
And it's only as reliable as the information that's loaded into it.
Okay, that's a good point. We got to go. I'm out of time. Thank you very much. I know you'll have some questions about this one. Again, thank you, Dave. Be safe, be trained, be alert. See you next week.